billionaire
And for you,
ordered in
sir?
Chinese to
I'll have the
humiliate the
ribeye,
waitress.
medium rare.
Her
Good
response
choice.
left
Make that
everyone
two.
speechless. But what he didn't know would destroy his entire empire in just 5 minutes. Look at this girl. I bet she can't even spell her own name. The words were spoken in Mandarin, fluid and venomous, cutting across the table like an invisible blade. Richard Chun didn't even bother lowering his voice. Why would he? To him, the black waitress standing beside the table was just part of the decor, as incapable of understanding his language as the flower arrangement in the center of the table. Maya Williams remained motionless. Her fingers gripped the notepad with controlled force. Her face betrayed nothing. She probably dropped out of high school. Richard continued in Mandarin to his 3 business partners, all of them chuckling quietly. These people are all the same. They serve plates and make babies. That's the best they can do. The Celestine was the most exclusive restaurant in San Francisco. Crystal chandeliers, imported linen tablecloths, a wine list that cost more than Maya's rent. It was Friday, 9 p.m., and the dining room was packed with executives, celebrities, and the kind of wealth that doesn't need price tags. Maya was 28 years old. She had worked there for 8 months. To the patrons, she was invisible. A black woman in a black uniform, braided hair pulled into a professional bun, worn shoes hidden beneath wide-leg pants. No one looked twice. "May I take your orders?" Maya asked in English, her voice soft and neutral. Richard Chun finally looked at her. Not at her face, at her hands, then at her shoes. He wrinkled his nose as if smelling something unpleasant. Richard Chun was the founder of TechSphere, a semiconductor giant valued at $12 billion. At 52, he had the posture of someone who had never heard the word no. Brioni suit, Patek Philippe watch, graying hair impeccably styled. He came to the Celestine every week to close deals and to feel superior. "Bring the tasting menu," Richard said in English, the words dripping with disdain, "and make sure the glasses are clean this time. Last week there was a smudge. Unacceptable." "Of course, sir," Maya said. She turned to leave, but Richard stopped her. "Wait." Maya stopped. Richard leaned toward his partners and said in Mandarin, smiling, "Let's have some fun. Watch this." He turned to Maya and spoke in rapid Mandarin, using a formal Shanghai dialect laden with archaic expressions that most foreigners would never learn. "Girl, you're so stupid. You probably think Beijing is a type of food. Bring the most expensive wine. I'll charge it to the restaurant and say you spilled it. Let's see how long you last in this job." The partners laughed. One of them nearly choked on his water. Richard waited for Maya's reaction. The confused look, the embarrassed smile of someone who doesn't understand, the submission he collected like trophies. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Maya didn't blink. She looked directly into his eyes. For 3 seconds, something crossed her face. Not confusion, not fear. Something Richard couldn't identify. Then she simply said, "Excuse me, sir," and walked away. Richard frowned for a moment. Something about that look bothered him, but he brushed off the thought. She was just a waitress, a nobody. What Richard Chun didn't know was that Maya Williams had just memorized every word he said, and that she understood Mandarin better than he could ever imagine. In fact, she understood it better than most people in Beijing. Because 4 years ago, Maya Williams wasn't a waitress in San Francisco. She was the youngest translator in history to work in the American ambassador's office in China. Maya crossed the Celestine's dining room with measured steps, her face a mask of professional calm. But inside, every word from Richard Chun burned like acid. She pushed through the kitchen door and leaned against the stainless steel counter. Her hands were trembling. "Maya, are you okay?" It was Diane, the veteran bartender, a red-haired woman in her early 50s who treated Maya like a daughter. "I'm fine." Maya took a deep breath. Table 12. The Chinese billionaire, Richard Chun. Diane made a face. "The one who tipped 3% last week and complained the ice was too cold? That's the one. What did he do?" Maya hesitated. How could she explain? How could she say the man had talked about her as if she were an animal? That he had planned out loud to make her lose her job? For fun? Nothing I can't handle, Maya said. Diane studied her face for a long moment. You've got that look. What look? The look of someone who's planning something. Maya didn't answer. She straightened her apron, picked up the tray with crystal glasses, and went back to the dining room. What Diane didn't know, what no one at the Celestine knew, was who Maya Williams really was. For years ago, Maya was in Beijing. Not as a tourist, as a U.S. State Department employee. She had graduated from Georgetown with a double major in international relations and Chinese linguistics. At 21, she spoke Mandarin with native fluency, including 4 regional dialects. At 22, she was recruited as a junior translator at the American Embassy. At 24, she was the ambassador's personal interpreter in high-level meetings. Maya had translated conversations between presidents. She had whispered words that moved markets and armies. She had sat in rooms where the fate of nations was decided. And then the call came. Her grandmother, Josephine Williams, the woman who had raised her alone after her parents died in a car accident when Maya was 7, had been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's. She can't stay alone, the doctor said, and she doesn't recognize anyone anymore. Except, she asks for you, Maya, every day. That's the only thing she remembers. Maya resigned that same week. She returned to San Francisco where her grandmother lived. She discovered that Josephine's retirement barely covered the medications, that the insurance denied coverage for the specialized clinic, that the only way to keep her grandmother out of a state institution was paying $4,800 a month for private caregivers. Maya needed money, fast. Diplomacy didn't pay cash tips. So she hung her diplomas in the back of the closet, bought a black uniform, and became invisible. Hey, Bennett's looking for you. The voice pulled Maya from her memories. It was Kevin, the rookie waiter, looking nervous. The manager? What does he want? I don't know, but table 12 asked to speak with him and he doesn't look happy. Maya felt her stomach drop. Richard Chun was already making his move. She found Gerald Bennett near the bar. A thin man in a cheap suit who ran the Celestine as if it were his own kingdom. Williams. Bennett didn't even look at her. Mr. Chun said you were rude. I didn't say a single word outside protocol. He said you stared at him aggressively. I looked at him while he was speaking. That's part of the service. Bennett finally looked at her. There was no sympathy in his eyes. Mr. Chun is responsible for 15% of this restaurant's revenue. You're responsible for nothing. If he says you were rude, you were rude. Understood? Maya clenched her fists inside her apron pockets. Understood. Good. Now go back there and apologize. Apologize for what? For whatever he wants. That's how it works, Williams. Welcome to the real world. Maya swallowed the response burning in her throat. She needed this job. For $1,800 a month. Her grandmother asking for her every day. Yes, sir. She walked back to table 12. Each step a battle against her pride. Richard Chun saw her approaching and his face lit up with cruel satisfaction. He said something in Mandarin to his partners. Maya heard clearly. Look, she's coming back to humiliate herself. I told you it would be easy. Maya stopped beside the table. Mr. Chun. The words came out like ground glass. I apologize if my service was unsatisfactory. Richard smiled. That predator's smile. An apology isn't enough, he said in English, loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. Kneel. The restaurant went silent. Excuse me? Maya said. You heard me. Kneel and apologize properly. In China, that's how servants show respect. His partners looked uncomfortable now. One of them murmured in Mandarin, Richard, this is too much. Shut up, Richard replied in the same language. I know what I'm doing. She doesn't understand anything. Maya looked at Richard Chun. She thought of her grandmother sitting in the rocking chair asking, Where's my Maya? She thought of the bills, the rent, the medications. And then she thought of something her grandmother told her once, long before the disease stole her memories. Baby, you can bend but never break. And when it's time to stand up in a way they'll never forget. Maya didn't kneel. Instead, she did something no one expected. She smiled. And the smile wasn't one of submission. It was the smile of someone who had just decided to stop pretending. The silence at the Celestine was absolute. Forks froze midair. Conversations died. Every eye was on the black waitress who refused to kneel. Richard Chun frowned. That smile unsettled him. It wasn't the smile of a defeated person. It was something else. Something he couldn't classify. "Didn't you hear me?" Richard said, his voice rising. "I said kneel." Maya tilted her head slightly. When she spoke, it wasn't in English. It was in Mandarin. Perfect, fluid, with a refined accent of someone who had learned the language in the corridors of power in Beijing. "Mr. Chun," Maya said, each syllable crystalline. "I heard everything you said tonight. Every word since you walked into this restaurant." The color drained from Richard's face. "You said I probably can't spell my own name. You said people like me are only good for serving plates and having babies. You said you were going to order the most expensive wine, blame me for spilling it, and make me lose my job. For fun." Richard's partners were paralyzed. One of them dropped his fork onto the plate with a clang that no one seemed to notice. Maya continued, her voice carrying through the silent dining room. "You also said 20 minutes ago, when you thought I was too far away to hear, that Mr. Zhang should falsify the emissions reports for the Shenzhen factory before Tuesday's audit. That the idiot American inspector would never notice the difference." Richard stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward. "Who are you?" he hissed in Mandarin. "Who sent you?" "No one sent me, Mr. Chun. I'm just a waitress." Maya paused. "A waitress who spent 4 years as a translator for the U.S. State Department. I worked at the embassy in Beijing. I translated meetings between the ambassador and members of the Politburo. I sat in rooms where trade sanctions were decided." She took a step forward. Richard took a step back. "I understand 4 dialects of Mandarin, Mr. Chun, including the Shanghai dialect you used to insult me. It's a beautiful dialect, by the way. You speak it with the pronunciation of someone who grew up in the Pudong district. Upper middle class, if I had to guess. Not as old money as you like to pretend." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. People were filming now. Phones raised, capturing every second. "This is absurd." Richard tried, switching to English, trying to regain control. "This woman is lying. She's a fraud. I'm going to sue this restaurant." "You can sue whoever you want," Maya said calmly, still in Mandarin. "But perhaps you should worry first about the lady at table 7. Richard looked at table 7. An elderly Chinese woman, white hair pulled into an elegant bun, was sitting alone, drinking tea. She watched the scene with eyes sharp as obsidian. "That's Mrs. Wei Linhua," Maya said. "Founder of Wei Investment Group, second largest shareholder in TechSphere. The woman you've spent 3 months courting to secure the Southeast Asia expansion contract." Richard went pale. "Mrs. Wei speaks English perfectly," Maya continued. "But she prefers to dine in silence and observe. She told me that when she placed her order an hour ago. She also told me she was here to evaluate your character before signing the contract." Mrs. Wei rose slowly. She walked to Richard's table with the dignity of an empress. When she spoke, it was in Mandarin, addressing Richard. "I built my company from nothing. I started selling tofu on the street when I was 14. I worked in restaurants. I cleaned bathrooms. I was treated like garbage by men who thought they were superior because they had money and I didn't." She looked at Maya, then back at Richard. "This young woman has more class in a single hair than you have in your entire fortune, Mr. Chun. The contract is cancelled permanently. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to call every board member at TechSphere and tell them exactly what I witnessed here tonight." "Mrs. Wei, please," Richard began. "I'm not finished." Mrs. Wei's voice cut like steel. "You also mentioned falsifying emissions reports. Environmental fraud. I have many friends at the Environmental Protection Agency. I think they would be very interested in that information." Richard Chun looked around, desperate. His partners were distancing themselves from him as if he had a contagious disease. The other diners watched him with open disgust. Dozens of phones were still recording. In less than 5 minutes, he had gone from predator to prey. This isn't over, Richard said, his voice trembling. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Maya said. A man who needs to diminish others to feel big. A man who measures people's worth by the shoes they wear. A man so used to being the most powerful person in the room that he forgot a basic rule. She leaned in slightly. Never underestimate someone just because they're wearing an apron. Richard said nothing more. He grabbed his jacket from the chair and marched toward the exit, shoving a waiter on the way. The Celestine's door slammed behind him with a finality that echoed through the dining room. No one went after him. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then someone started clapping. Then another and another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was on its feet, applauding Maya Williams. But Maya wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Mrs. Wei, who approached her and held her hands. You worked at the embassy in Beijing? Mrs. Wei asked in Mandarin. Yes, ma'am. For 4 years. Why did you leave? Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. My grandmother. She's sick. She needs me. Mrs. Wei studied Maya's face for a long moment. Then she smiled. A smile that transformed her severe face into something almost maternal. Come see me on Monday, Mrs. Wei said. My office is on the 40th floor of the Transamerica Pyramid. I need someone with your skills and your courage. She placed a card in Maya's hand. Bring your grandmother if you want. I have a driver who can pick you both up. I also have a son-in-law who's a neurologist at Stanford. Alzheimer's specialist. Maya looked at the card, then at Mrs. Wei. Why? Maya whispered. Why help me? Because 60 years ago I was you. Mrs. Wei squeezed her hand. A girl everyone underestimated. And someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same. Sunday's sun came through the window of the small apartment in Oakland, painting golden stripes on the worn carpet. The smell of pancakes floated in the air. Grandma's recipe, which Maya had memorized before the disease took the memories. Maya was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Mrs. Wei's card. She had looked at it at least 100 times since Friday. Wei Investment Group, Director of International Relations, Asia Pacific. The position paid $175,000 a year. It included full health insurance, dependent coverage, and access to a network of specialists Maya could never afford on her own. But that wasn't what made her look at the card repeatedly. It was the possibility of becoming herself again. Maya. The voice came from the hallway, fragile, hesitant, but familiar. Maya put the card in her pocket and went to the living room. Her grandmother, Josephine Williams, was sitting in the rocking chair by the window. At 82, she seemed smaller every month. Alzheimer's had stolen so much. Names, faces, decades of memories. But today her eyes were clear. It was one of the good days. Come here, baby. Josephine extended her wrinkled hand. Maya knelt beside the chair, holding that hand that had held hers so many times. The hand that had braided her hair before the first day of school. The hand that had embraced her at her parents' funeral. The hand that had waved at the airport when she left for Beijing. You look different, Josephine said, studying her granddaughter's face. You look lighter. Maya smiled. Something happened. Grandma. Something good, I think. Tell me. Maya told her. Not all the details. Josephine didn't need to know about the insults, about the order to kneel. But she told her about Mrs. Wei, about the offer, about the possibility of using her mind, her languages, her skills again. Josephine listened in silence. When Maya finished, the grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember what I told you when you went to China? Josephine asked. Maya nodded. You told me to fly high, but never forget where I came from. And do you remember what I said when you came back? When you gave up everything to take care of me? Maya felt her eyes sting. You said I didn't have to do that. And you said you did. Josephine squeezed her granddaughter's hand. I never asked you to stop flying, baby. I just needed you to stay close while I learned how to land. A tear rolled down Maya's face. You sacrificed too much for me, Josephine continued. Your career, your dreams, your future. A stubborn old woman isn't worth all that. Grandma, don't say that. Let me finish. Josephine's eyes shone with fierce lucidity. You took care of me. Now it's time to take care of yourself. Accept this job, Maya. Fly again. But what about you? I can't leave you alone. Josephine smiled. That smile Maya had known forever. The smile that said everything would be okay, even when it seemed impossible. Baby, you're not leaving me. You're taking me with you, right here. She touched her own heart. And maybe sometimes you'll take me for a visit to that fancy office. I want to meet this Chinese lady who saw my granddaughter for real. Maya laughed through her tears. She stood up and hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling the fragile bones, the lavender scent, the familiar warmth. I love you, Grandma. I know, baby. I love you too. Even when I forget my own name, I'll never forget that. On Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning, Maya entered the elevator at the Transamerica Pyramid. She wore a navy blue dress she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for an interview that never happened. The shoes were still the same, worn but clean. Mrs. Wei received her personally at the office door. You came? Mrs. Wei said in Mandarin. I came, Maya replied in the same language. Good. We have a lot of work. Mrs. Wei guided her through the office. TechSphere has been in crisis since Friday. The videos went viral. 3 board members resigned. Richard Chun is facing a federal investigation for environmental fraud. Maya stopped walking. Federal investigation? The EPA inspector Richard called an idiot saw the videos. Apparently, he didn't like the term. Mrs. Wei smiled dryly. Richard Chun learned a valuable lesson. Be careful what you say in public. You never know who's listening. They reached a conference room overlooking San Francisco Bay. The Golden Gate Bridge gleamed in the morning sun. This will be your office, Mrs. Wei said. Your first task is to lead negotiations with Singapore's Ministry of Trade. They want a deal by the end of the month. Maya looked at the room, at the view, at the woman who had given her a second chance. Mrs. Wei, why me? You could have anyone. Mrs. Wei walked to the window. She was silent for a moment, looking at the city below. When I was 16, I worked as a cleaner at a hotel in Hong Kong. A rich guest accused me of stealing a watch he had lost himself. The manager fired me on the spot. No one asked for my side. No one cared. She turned to Maya. I spent 50 years building my company so I would never be treated like that again. And I spent 50 years looking for people like me. People who were underestimated, discarded, invisible. Because those are the people who understand what really matters. Mrs. Wei placed her hand on Maya's shoulder. You could have knelt. You could have stayed silent. You could have accepted the humiliation to keep a job that paid tips. But you chose your dignity. That can't be taught. That's who you are. Maya couldn't respond. The words were stuck in her throat, along with the tears. Now, Mrs. Wei said, returning to business. Enough emotion. We have a meeting in 20 minutes. I hope your Singapore Mandarin is sharp. Maya smiled, wiping her eyes. It is. That night, Maya returned to the Oakland apartment with Chinese food from her grandmother's favorite restaurant. They ate together in the small living room, the TV on a game show neither of them was really watching. Maya's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She opened it. It was a photo. Gerald Bennett, the Celestine's manager, holding a cardboard box outside the restaurant. The caption read, "Fired for creating a hostile environment. Karma exists. Diane." Maya looked at the photo for a long moment. Then she put her phone away. She didn't feel joy at Bennett's fall. She didn't feel revenge. She felt something better. She felt peace. Maya. Her grandmother's voice brought her back. Yes, Grandma? Josephine was looking at her with that confused expression that appeared when the disease clouded things. Do you work at that fancy restaurant? Maya's heart tightened. One of the bad days was coming. Not anymore, Grandma. Now I work in an office. Remember? I told you yesterday. Josephine frowned, trying to grasp the memory that was slipping away. Then something cleared in her eyes. That Chinese lady, Josephine said slowly. The one who saw you for real. Maya smiled, the tears returning. That's right, Grandma. The same one. Josephine nodded, satisfied. She looked back at the TV, the confusion passing like a cloud. That's good, baby. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. You deserve to be seen. Maya held her grandmother's hand. Outside, San Francisco's lights were beginning to turn on, one by one, dotting the darkness like promises. And for the first time in 3 years, Maya Williams wasn't just surviving. She was living. Maya proved that dignity has no price, and that the most powerful people in the room aren't always the ones sitting at the head of the table. If this story touched you, subscribe to StorySphere and share it with someone who needs to remember. Your worth isn't defined by your uniform, your salary, or what others think of you. In the comments, tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who you really were?